Hey guys, welcome.
How you doing? Hi.
And so I'm just going to jump straight in. So what inspires your decision to want to produce or develop a project?
Anyone can start?
Anyone can start.
I think what inspires me is a story and how they want to tell that story. If it's a story that fits into like what I want to talk about, and if it's something that does it in a way that feels different and new, then yeah, that's it.
That's what it is. Anyone else? Anything?
For me, I'll definitely echo that. For me, like the three things for me is like hope. Like I want stories that've got that in it. A point of view that makes you feel something when you're watching it. And also to understand like the creative need to make that story. Like if I can, when them three things are in alignment for me, then it's just like it's a go.
What's a creative need?
So for me, the creative need is like what part of you needs to tell this story. Do you know what I'm saying? Like you can tell, for me, and that difference is, for me, tends to be what might be able to take it across the line. Like if it's just an idea that you think is sick and you think, oh, that's cool. It's like if I work with a creative who just tells me the work is sick, I don't know what that could mean for you. But if you need to tell this story, if it's a part of you, it's like a singer in a room that's empty and they just need to sing. Do you know what I mean? Like that kind of spirit, that kind of feeling, then that tends to be a go.
And how do you go?
Yeah, I suppose that, I'm influenced. My decision to tell stories are influenced by all of those things. But I suppose what, for me, where in the past few years, because I've been focused more on film work, is that actually I always think about cultural impact. What's the culture saying? Why does the culture? I think about, for me now, and I've only arrived at this point because someone asked me a similar question a few days, like weeks ago, and I was like, actually the reason I do what I do is because actually I want to shift culture, and like the projects that are impacting the world in a meaningful way and that people of colour are getting behind are stories that are sort of shift the culture or reflect the culture back onto itself. And so I feel like that's definitely a massive ingredient in why I do what I do, and I can go through every single project and at different stages of my career. At the time I didn't know that's why I was doing it, but I think definitely I'm influenced by culture, wherever that is. So like, with the Intent 2 we shot in Jamaica, I wanted it to be authentically Jamaican. That was really important to me, and I didn't want to put subtitles on it because that way of speaking English is a way of speaking English. Is English as well, and it should be included and accepted as a way of speaking English. And so like for me, and also but massively I'm influenced by the need to tell Black British stories because they've just not been told. Like people outside of England just about know we exist and are just about seeing our culture through like the music industry as opposed to through the film and TV industry.
So how does someone get their ideas to you if you're not generating yourself? How does someone find you guys and say, hey, I've got this idea, I'd like you to make it, help me make it?
I meet a lot of writers day in and day out, to be fair, but that's like part of my job, I suppose. So I guess it's just making yourself accessible. I think that's the sort of easiest way to meet people, meet writers, meet producers or directors, I would say.
I'd say it's different for you because you're actually a script editor, developer.
Yeah, I'm a script editor, so I mean, a lot of the time those writers are sort of brought to me because I'm the one that has to facilitate, the note-giving process or whatnot. But outside of that, I have actively sort of looked at people's work and engaged with them, hit them up and just been like, I like your stuff, what are you up to? Can I read your work? Can we talk?
How do you deal with the volume though? Because I find now I've got a volume problem. So I used to try and read everything that everyone sent me. Now I just can't. And I tell people, oh, do you know what? If you want feedback soon, like, you're just not gonna get it. Like, and I'm building more of a team so I can deal with that. I'm expanding my team so that I can have people that can help me out with that. But I feel bad at the same time because they want me to read it. They don't want they want my feedback. They don't want anyone else's feedback. But I think I struggle with volume.
I think it is just like being honest at the end of the day. Like I have people say, can you read this? And I'm like, well, this is what my load is. This is like feasibly when I'm going to get to it, I will try my best. And sort of just play it like that.
But I'm greedy as well because I'm like, what if I miss a good story?
Okay, so Firstly, my trainers are ruined. Cool? And then you with the brick, that wasn't fair, man. But let's just stop this now, before anyone else gets hurt, all right?
Yo, they're calling you, man. What's wrong? You're moving like you want to break up with me or something.
Nah, man, I love you.
You sure?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Come on.
I suppose Angela, working at Joi Productions, Lenny Henry's organisation, I'm sure you get hit with the volume issue.
Yes, yeah, there is a big volume issue, but I mean, most of you guys seem to be making drama. Yeah, which we do a variety of other things as well. So it's a few different issues. One is we are within a bigger company and we want to control our own IP, and that's quite important. So I come up with ideas, and I have development producers, and we have brainstorms, and then he has ideas. So I would say in the factual entertainment music space, a lot of those things we're generating ourselves, documentary space, etc. So all of that space is stuff that we do. But we also do drama, so I completely understand what you're saying, Florence, about the volume of things that come in. So I have readers who read things. So I read some, we have readers who read things, and then depending on what the script report is, and then it goes on. So it's a process. Because apart from that, I'm going to commissioning meetings all the time. I'm going to briefings, I'm meeting people, I'm meeting talent, people who want jobs, people who want advice, going to things. So you know, I could just be completely overloaded and overwhelmed. So I've had to put certain things in place to make sure that I can actually do my job, move Douglas Road on in the way that Lenny and I want it to be moved on, which means being able to create more authentic stories, whether that's in documentaries or drama or whatever it is that we're doing, and employ the right people and give opportunities as well. So all of that is a process that takes time. So yeah, I mean, it's better to, you know, I agree with Femi actually, you need to not spread yourself too thinly, because otherwise if you do that then you will miss out on something good. But it's all about delegation if you've got the facilities and the ability to do that as well.
And what about being touchable? Because when you're on a smaller scale, I think maybe if you're behind an organisation that's bigger and more renowned, you have those people in place where you're not the person that people are gravitating towards and maybe harassing you, like, hey, I've got this idea, How do you protect yourself from that, and how do you filter through when you are more on the ground, grassroots?
I always meet people first. So if someone sends me an idea, if I like the idea, like I usually say, give me like a 3-4 line pitch, whatever it is, and then I meet them and then just like have meeting. If I think I kind of get a sense of from talking to them if they actually, if their idea has legs or not. And I think off the back of that is when I'm like, cool, I want to work with you, but it's going to take a certain amount of time, and be honest about it. But there's some times when, you know, if your plate is full, it's like you can't do anything, then you can't actually be like, there's some things you kind of have to let go because you literally have no time because it's just you. But sometimes I just meet them and I just keep in touch, because something might come up in like a year, I don't know, or something else might drop. So it's just about being a people person, I think.
Oh, hey Timmy. Hey Kim. Are you guys shopping for Karina's party as well?
What the fuck is this? Or Marco, we're just following it. It's my training. So what? You little youngers didn't see me and my boy coming to talk to these two things?
No, we never saw you, I swear.
Alright. Bounce?
Hey, Tim, let's go.
No, I'm not going nowhere. Unless you want me to go with you.
No, Timmy, you don't have to go. Excuse me, but these are our friends, and I'm not trying to be rude, but...
We're not interested, so if anyone's got to go, it's you guys.
Why is it always the dead thing to start talking?
She's not dead.
Don't talk to my friend like that.
Or what? I'll move from her, man.
Being a producer, is it better to be a part of a production company, your own production company, embedded in another organisation, and then for script editor, would you rather be assigned, or is it better to be assigned to a production company or independent? How does it work? Which gives you more fruit for your labour?
I think, I guess my experience is it really is project dependent. Do you know what I mean? Like, I love the guerrilla hustle. I love being agile. I like being able to work with a smaller team. But there's projects that we're doing at the moment that I'm in love with the idea, and I know that we need people with more experience and a bit more reach to unlock a few doors. Do you know what I mean? So I think it definitely depends on the project. And then there is a sense of, like, for me, I think one of the lessons that has probably taken me the longest to learn is the difference between knowing who you are but also knowing who you're not. And I think sometimes we get sold other people's dreams. So like I definitely was like, I want to be this sort of producer, blah, 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 blah. And actually, I spent 10 years doing documentaries. And if you told me that at the beginning, like when I was going to film school, I'd be doing documentary, I'd have laughed at you. I'd be like, that's so boring, why do I want to do that? The first time I had an 84-year-old man who was like terminally ill sharing his stories from that space, I was like, wait, what? You're going to pay me to listen to someone talk? This is amazing. And I was all in. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's a combination of what the project is, where do you want to go, and actually what suits you, you know?
I think just on that though, I think one of the issues now in working with, particularly in terrestrial television in the UK, is that people are very pigeonholed into one genre or the other, and so you'll quite often see, say, an advert for something or other, some fixed streak show, for instance, and they'll say you must have done One Born Every Minute in Educating Essex and 24 Hours in Police Custody, etc. So even if you're experienced in one thing, then it's very, very difficult to break into that, although it's the same skill set. And I do think that that is quite a big issue, where people are being stuck in something and they can't move across. And so therefore I do think that there is a lot of value in sometimes stepping away from that, doing some of your own stuff, and then you know, sometimes you'll just do a job for money, but it might be a job in a slightly different direction, and I think that is a good thing to do.
I was going to say about actually, how do you define what type of producer you are? How do you test your metal as a producer?
I suppose it just depends how you come into the industry, how you get into producing. And so, like, you know, there's obviously the traditional TV way, where you get into producing through being a development person. So, like, you know, natural trajectory. I'm not saying this is what you're gonna do. Would be like, you know, you develop and then you go up the ranks that way. So you go from being a development person to being a producer within TV, or you're like a production person and then you go into producing. That's how it would normally work in TV. But then in film, it's sort of like, you know, it's more guerrilla. It's more like, you know, like sort of, you make a few shorts and then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really good at this, and then you make a few more things and then you just build it. I suppose it's more there's more of a free reign in film, and then you just build the relationships to enable you to get the projects off. So like you need to have a network in a way. So like for me, like, you know, I started out as an actor. I was acting when I was 17, and then I came out of uni, I studied law, and I was like, oh, actually I want to make stuff, and I started making shorts, and then from there I realized one of my friends was doing a deal for a feature film, and I kind of helped him to do the deal, like, because I was the only one person he knew that sort of understood the contract and stuff like that. Like, actually I can do this, and then I produced more and more stuff, and then from there I just built my skill set, and then, you know, from there I realized actually I'm really good at this, and then so it was more of a free flowing process for me.
Do any of you know, do you ever wake up and say, I'm going to be a producer, this is what I want to be?
I don't think that people do that, actually. In the sort of documentary, reality, fixed read, that kind of television, most people now will come in as runners or loggers or something like that, data wranglers, and then work their way up. So it's so if they're not on the production side, which is production secretary, production management, production exec, while you're dealing with the money and the logistics and the legal side, then you are working on a production, but probably as a runner, then a junior researcher, then an assistant producer, then a producer. So for me, a lot of people now, when they're going to television, they're a lot more aware of where they can go. But I think there is an issue with people thinking that they can be a producer straight away. So just on what Joi was saying earlier about how you meet people and deal with the workload. So we've got someone in our office who, she had made a short film or something, about 2 years ago, and a friend of mine saw her film and connected her to me, and I emailed her at the time and then couldn't meet her. And then about a year later, I was going through my emails and I thought, oh, what happened to that young woman who wrote to me, you know, that I was connected with? And then she came in fairly recently, and so she's working for us now because she had a really nice showreel and she had some great ideas, etc. But it was a year after. But the reason why I mention her is because she had been making a lot of her own stuff. But of course, when you come into an office and there's a big team and there's, you know, endless things to do, then it's a very, very different experience. So I did say to her when she'd been there a couple of weeks, I said, how are you finding it? She said, oh, so different to what I thought it would be. Because, of course, if you're making your own stuff or, you know, whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter. No one's going to tell you, you can't use that piece of music, or you can't film in that place, or you need the permission from the council to do that, or did you get a release form from that person, because you're just doing it all yourself. So it's all of those things that are not going to get you into trouble later on, that you learn on a production. So it's quite interesting, I think, for her being there, because she's still doing her own stuff, but and she's a YouTuber, interestingly. She's a YouTuber, so yeah, so it's interesting that she's getting both sides. But yeah, I'm sure that she didn't think that it was all of those things.
So what was what's the producer's ultimate goal?
Make the best film.
What about your personal development in the role? Like, is it just making sure the product is perfect, it's good?
What do you mean?
I feel like that's the job, though. Ultimately, the job is to, like, you know, you to see an idea from conception to execution, to see it through, and then to see it executed well, is I think that's the goal. And then at the same time, you want everyone. At one stage, I thought, yeah, if I make something, I want everyone to love everything I do. And then actually, I got to a stage where I'm like, no, I don't really care. As long as I make what I want to make, that's the win. But initially, I thought, yeah, if I make something, the whole world's gonna like it. And that's when you come in the game. You're like, yeah, the whole world. And then you realize actually the goal is, for me now, is to see an idea like, oh, I see this thing in my head, or someone else pitches me this thing and I see it, and we're able to do it exactly how we plan to do it, and, like, you know, go through all the paperwork and all this and all of that, and sort out all the madness that goes into bringing that thing to life. That's my win, and at that point I'm good.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah. I think, I mean, from my perspective, sort of development wise, I think it's making sure that that writer's vision is actualised at the end of the day, because obviously you're going to get notes from an exec or your channel or whoever, but obviously the integrity of the writer's vision is what you want to carry through. So as long as I can, you know, obviously if I align myself with that and that can be actualised, then that's like the icing on the cake, really.
And what's your relationship with the producers?
So I'm like the middle person between the writer and a producer. Obviously the producer's going to have sort of notes about things that they can that can happen. And I have to make sure the writer is aware of that. Similarly, I need to be able to make a producer know that, or realise that maybe a writer's stance isn't going to maybe change on something, and sort of essentially bridge that gap so the communication is always clear and everybody is on the same page.
It's just to add to that, I've made stuff that I've not liked. Yeah. So like, I liked it on paper, and then it's been made how it was on paper, and you're like, actually, that's the weird, like, you know, when I first came into the on the production side of things, I never thought that was possible. Like, you know, once the script is perfect, it's gonna be perfect, right? And then you see it and you're like, actually, obviously not straight away, you're like, no, it's good, it's good. It's good. And then like months later, a year later, you're like, oh yeah, actually that was bad. We did that bad thing. Oh yeah, remember that time when we did that thing? It was awful, but yeah.
I think everyone's got like a couple of like things to like, yeah, I can't show anyone that.
Please share them. Name a project that really tested you and challenged you as a producer, and actually how you feel it failed, if you feel like it failed, or how you managed to overcome that hurdle and like, yeah, we turned it around, this is actually much better.
You have to name the actual project.
Oh, if you like.
I don't think you can name
Only
it.
you can name the
Because you'll
actual
offend
project.
the team. You'll
You know what
offend
I
the
mean?
team.
Personal thing, sure.
I had a
obviously.
project that I would say that was in Iceland, and it was a documentary that when it got pitched to me, I was so excited, and I really thought we were like gonna make history. Like it was this spiritual. We're gonna uncover this thing. We had it was insane, and it was kind of around the time that the Da Vinci Code came out. It was something in that kind of space. And I was brought up in church, so I was like, this is going to be levels. It was the worst shoot ever in my life. I mean, it's like everything that could go wrong. Like, if you wanted to convince me that Loki was a real thing and there was a god of mischief around us, I would believe you. But it was one of those ones where, like, we lost data, cameras overheated, we, like, everything that could go wrong. People were, like, having breakdowns in Iceland, who'd been together for, like, 30 years, now hate each other, didn't want to be, like, everything went wrong. And it was one of those shoots where you just, some part of you goes, okay, this is it. This, God willing, as bad as it will ever get, I'm going to keep going. Like, so no matter, like, what happens on set or who says what, in my head I'm like, you've had Iceland.
Yeah.
You've had it. Like, it's all right.
Sure.
And I remember, like, the mantra every day was like, I will get to my bed. That was it. Like, every day was just, I will get to bed. At some point, this day will end. And that was it. But, like, I thank life for those experiences, you know what I mean? Because we did end up, wasn't the big thing I wanted it to be, but we learned so much in terms of crew, in terms of the shorthand, in terms of what you think you can do versus what nature might throw up, how you need to prepare in these different spaces, and also just the kind of the read of the people you're going to be working with, like, because red flags are amber before they go red. Do you know what I mean? And I saw the ambers and was like, I'll be fine. It was not fine. And it was just like, okay, done, lesson learned.
So who's the producers go to when things are going on top? Because you are ultimately
to the execs,
yeah.
So the buck stops, or the series producer, depending on who's out. But just on that, because that's just so interesting, I think that a lot of people, young people, or whoever who want to go into television or film, have this assumption that it's going to be a very glamorous life.
Sure.
Because you only see the end result of it, and you don't see all of that stuff that goes on when you're in. Because I used to be a producer in children's television, and I mean I've been very lucky because I actually have had a very glamorous life out of television, but that's actually quite unusual. But before my life became glamorous, well, I sort of had a bit where it was glamorous, then it wasn't, and then it was again. But in that middle bit, you know, I tell the story of when I lay for an entire day in coal dust under a table, because where I was filming, the room was so small that was the only place I could see the monitor and direct the shoots. The whole day in coal dust, covered in coal dust, and lying on the floor.
Oh my gosh.
So, you know, that's glamorous. Another time I was in Scotland, filming with these little children, and it was pouring with rain, and I had to sort of rush them into a thing and then pull them out just to do their road pusher. Anyway, I got back to the hotel, I was absolutely freezing as well. And I literally stood in the doorway because I was so cold, shivering after a whole day of this, and I put out my arms and I said I needed some towels and I wanted a hot drink in my hand. When I got to my room, I put the cup down, and all this water poured over my head. I went, oh, where's that water coming from? I thought, oh, there's a leak. And then and all day my shoulders had been getting heavy, and I was going, why's my shoulders so heavy? I just don't understand it. My hood was full of water. The entire thing was full, and when I bent down like this, it was the water from my hood pouring over my head. So, you know, that was glamorous. That was one of my more glamorous limousine red carpet moments. But there's loads of those. We're in the middle. Another time we were filming in the middle of nowhere, and all the crew went back, and there's nothing worse than having a crew that's hungry. Never ever do that, because that is the worst thing ever. And we got back, and they'd only put out a few sandwiches, and by the time the main crew came back, there was no food. No food, and it was a Sunday night, we were in the middle of nowhere, and somebody got on the phone, and about 200 pizzas turned up. Because otherwise there would have been a riot. All these people would not have gone to work the next day.
So who's I'm going to ask, who's your right hand? Or who's your best friend on set? Or in this process?
So I just always started to work with other producers,
Okay.
and just have them as co-producers, associate producers. because it just helps to have somebody else to talk to about this stuff. So sometimes you feel like you're going crazy. So that's what I do now. So there's always somebody else who, in a producing capacity, I can talk to. That or the line producer.
Yeah, for me, my line producer is like my energetic opposite, and it just works. She is like OCD, attention to detail, so you just have a level of trust with her. And I want to fix this problem and this thing over here, but I don't care what someone's laces are, like, you sort that out. Do you know what I mean? But I think having those people who you know can balance with, but also have the shorthand, who can just read your face at time and be like, okay, we got it. You know, that, yeah.
I think it's important to have people with facial disfigurements in the movie industry because it just makes people aware of what people that live with facial disfigurements are going through, and it gives them that sort of like self-esteem.
But if you had a positive character, I think some of these things will just make it easier to deal with.
I am not your villain.
I am not your villain.
I am not your villain.
I'm not your villain.
I am not your villain.
So what are some of the, because you mentioned line producer, there's exec producer, there's development producer, supervising producer, co-producer, coordinating, it goes on, field, segment, associate producer. How do you, one, define who you are in this space?
By how much you're getting paid.
Really?
That's part
how much you're getting paid, how much you own, like if you own anything,
if you own anything,
and you know, and all of that stuff. And ultimately, it's I suppose it differs in between TV and film,
yes.
but ultimately, like, you know, in film, it's how much you own, how much you're getting paid, and what you agree at the start. Because, you know, you could have exec producers that own everything and they just need a producer that they're gonna pay loads of money to front it, and the producer owns nothing. They've just got their fees. And so it just depends. Associate producers tend to be like random people that work at the offices of the distribution company or the investors that have to get a credit because they work there. And sometimes, you know, so associate producer is quite, a lot of the time it's quite loose, it's quite broad how you, like, you know, most of the time.
So just to jump in, when you see a celebrity credited with producer,
what do you mean? Like, it depends. If it's an actor, an actor that's in the film, they probably greenlit the film and said, unless I've got a producer credit,
or something like that.
Oh, something. So they've basically said, you know, this is my film, I'll be in it as well, and I'm not really producing. Everyone knows I'm not really producing, but I did produce it by finding it, by aligning the team together, by, you know.
Same thing with some writers as well. Some writers get producers credit. They didn't really produce it, but the original
I think
idea.
it's different though when it comes to writers and producing, just because they've written it. So essentially, they kind of have produced the work. So it can be different in that.
I mean, they produce the foundation to the work. Like, you know.
In film, it's a bit more tricky. It's kind of like
I guess.
Yeah, in film, it's like you don't always see writers who are producers. Maybe more so in TV. Like
in TV, what you got the writer showrunner now, haven't you?
As people like Jed McKeown and Russell T Davis. That's what they are. They're the producer, showrunner, writer. The one who does Doctor Who, whose name is,
I can't even remember.
Yes, yes. So people like that. Yeah. But over the years, American, we're sort of conflating British television and film in terms with American ones, because here in TV we don't really have associate producers, and we don't really have what we now call a segment producer. So a segment producer is when you watch This Morning, and so all those people used to be called assistant producers. Now they're called, I mean, the American term has come in, the segment producer. So the segment producer is the one who produces the cookery, or the fashion, or the consumer. So that's their speciality. They're producing that segment. That's what the segment producer is. Assistant producer is what they, that's what the tax office calls them. They call them the assistant producer. So, and then sometimes a producer is just the person who brings in the money if it's in film. So in television, the producer is the person who's putting the show together and runs a budget.
So how are your roles influenced by what's going on in America at all? Anything, is climate changing? Is anything shifting? Are we?
I mean, the one thing, for me in film, I do notice is, I don't think it's kind of American influence, only because I think a lot of people are just not interested in the diaspora and like Africa in general. So I find like when I go to meetings, people are actually more interested to seeing things. Oh, you can, where can you shoot in Africa? What is it about? And I think that's come more so from America than from here itself. That's the only thing I've noticed for me.
Other reasons?
Well, the American sort of the platforms, really, that's
Okay.
it, right? It just means that there's more outlets for work, for your work, and so, like, you know, I've been able to make and release my last 2 films without really talking to anyone within the British film industry. and making good money from them, and like to make them and from releasing them. So like I suppose like we've been like from the start, from the off. So like the last one was distributed by Vertigo, so we had to, you know, sort of work with them. But really and truly, I've not received any funding from the BFI. I've never worked with them. I mean, I've meetings with them now, like, but like, you know, so, you know, and that's only happened because, like, you know, we've been able to develop a model that works without that. But I don't know how sustainable that is. I don't know how, you know, ongoing that's going to be. But, like, you know, so I suppose that American market has influenced my work in that way, and that, you know, we can do a deal with Netflix. We're developing shows for Netflix and films for Netflix and stuff like that. And so that wouldn't have happened. So, yeah.
I think for me, there's obviously the title of showrunner. So in development, or at least in television, more writers want to be the showrunner, which means the script editor sort of role is, I guess, dwindling a little bit, just because obviously showrunners have sort of the final say over what they're gonna what they're gonna do. They talk to the exec producer directly, and they can sort of work out between themselves without any need for the script editor sometimes to be that middle person.
I suppose what's weird, sometimes they are the exec producer. This is what, like, you know, like, I've been in a meeting with a writer on a show, like, and he was the exec producer along with, like, you know, someone from the production company, and he went in on the broadcasters, and no one could say anything to him because he was the god of this show. And because he was the god of this show, and he knew everything about this show, and he wanted, it was a meeting, like, it was a marketing meeting, and he just went in at the team and was like, and you could tell that actual execs, the people that worked at the production company, were looking at him like, dude, we've got loads of shows with them, what's going on with you? Like, you know, you need to relax. But he just went, and so, like, I feel like the writer within TV, like, you know, the brand name writers, the bigger writers, they're like the end all and be all of, like, you know, TV dramas. I feel like they've got a lot of power, and that comes from America.
Yeah,
what was that show any good?
I mean, it got a season 2. It got a season 2, and I don't know. Do you know what? I don't even. The thing is, I feel like good is a broad church, isn't it? And so the thing is, the more time I spend in the industry, the more I realise I don't think anything's good. I could watch anything and just be like, yeah, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. They could have done that better. And so, like, now I just feel like, you know, and I've done stuff where I've like, oh yeah, I don't super love that, and then audiences come to me and they're like, oh my gosh, it's the best thing I've ever watched, and I'm looking at them like, you're being genuine, you're not even saying this to but in my head I'm like, oh, I thought that was really bad, but they're like, no, I love it, I think it's amazing. So now I think good is a broad church for me.
Okay, so let me ask you something else then. So this person is having a rant.
Who
wants to work with that person again?
Well, I definitely didn't, but then and I'm sure this is the thing. I feel like actually our industry is one of the most forgiving industries, because there are loads of people that are not good people. They're not good people.
Well, is it forgiving or because of the money?
Yeah, not exactly. No, it's forgiving. In other industries, if you're not a good person, like you're sort of maligned and managed out, or like, you know. Whereas, like, you know, in our industry, people get second chances again and again and again, because actually they're good. People like it. Yeah, he's not a nice guy, but it works.
Plenty of people to work with, though. That's the thing. There's also loads more people to work with, so your reputation might not travel to certain corners.
Does that apply to race?
No, I know loads of people that everyone universally says, oh yeah, I don't like him or I don't like her, and they still work with them.
Does that apply to race and gender?
Does that apply to racism? What do you mean?
You know, as people are saying that, you know, we as people of colour don't get second chances, can that still work in this, from the perspective that you're giving? Are people, black producers, black script developers?
No, you just have to win. As black people, you have to win because you're doing it for your whole race. You're expected to do it for like you're carrying it for like, you know, like all the billion black people in the world. You represent them. So like, if you don't win, like you've let. It's so that's the only standard, right? If you're a black person and you do something that kind of worked, like, you know, my partner was saying this to me. She was like, you know, sometimes you come back from meetings and it's like these people are trying to infantilize you. They're trying to every time. You could do anything. You could like win an Oscar. They would be like, yeah, but it wasn't a real Oscar. Like,
it was a diversity Oscar.
Yeah. It was like, no, but that was the time when there was loads of black people on the panel. That's why you won it. You could do anything, and so it's all like it's almost like people constantly trying to diminish you if you're black, or diminish your achievements. Whereas like, if you're like, you know, from my observation, if you're non-black, if you're white, let's be real, if you're white, right, you could just do something that's mediocre, but then you get a next bigger platform.
And
but
also, I think it's that thing, if you're black, is that, you know, whatever you bring out, that's how all black people feel. And you're like, no, everyone has their own stories. It's like the same way you have, like in terms of like, you have like 20,000 serial killers who are white, and they all have their own little stories. I feel like you bring out Black Panther and it can only be one, and you can't bring out something else that is similar because they're like, oh, I think like Black Panther, and it's like, why is it always got to be one of everything black? And you know, it's that thing of like, sometimes when you hear stories from people who have meetings, for like development meetings, and you know, the people come back going, oh, we've already got that one black story, we can't do, or we've already got the Indian story for the year, like our quota is full, we can't do another one because there's one for everyone.
So how do you navigate, Tyson? How do you navigate those tick boxes that you obviously just physically, visibly, you already check off?
So for me, this comes back to the first thing of like, what do you look for in a story? So when I say point of view, so the feature that we're working on at the moment, the drama, is for us, it's kind of like Moonlight meets Be Kind Rewind. So it is a true story, and it's a kid who wants to go and make films. And it's the ex-drug dealer and this kid coming together to stop a place that being shut down. And this is a real story, and we were like having a talk about part of this earlier on. And whilst I've heard a version of the drug dealer narrative 1 billion times, what I haven't seen is that this person was also the one that, like, if you were coming up on your estate and your mum was coming up the road with bags of shopping, he was the one that was like, what are you doing? Your mum's coming up. That side of him, I haven't seen that on screen in a way that I recognise. So I remember like watching Moonlight and being like, Mahershala's character being like, I know him, but he's Moroccan where I'm from. Like, I know that person, I know that care, I know that empathy, I know that 100 years ago he would have been, you know, selling alcohol when that was illegal, and that's how he would have made his capital, and then he would have transitioned to something else. So I feel like I'm always going to look for the story that feels right for me. You know, and in some places, some people will say, is that black enough? Is that, I don't care. Like, I feel like my job, to your point, in terms of the culture, is what do we get to see? Like, I want to see the philosopher who looks like me. I want to see the one who hasn't got it all figured out. Like, I want to see our version of E.T. Do you know what I mean? I want to see those stories that I looked for when I was growing up as well. And in the early days, like, we just made our own money and started making stuff ourselves, because I knew someone wasn't going to say, oh, you can do it, because it hasn't been proven. So the early documentaries, we didn't pay ourselves for 3 years, and we just went out and we made it. And we went and interviewed pioneers and this and that, because I wanted to talk about mental health. No one was going to say, like, yeah, you could do that. It didn't make sense. Everyone was like, why don't you do another music video? Why don't you do this? So I feel like there is a DIY mindset of just do it yourself and find a way. So I didn't really know per se, like, oh, I'm a producer. I was just figuring out problems, and someone else said, oh, that's this role, by the way, that's what you're doing. I was like, well, I'm just going to keep doing it. That's what we do.
You said just get the money. Just get the money. How easy? Where's the money these days?
The money's wherever you can get it, man. The money's, I feel like, you know, that's the people like, so how do you fund your project? Like, we just find a way, like, you know, you just sort of find a way. I suppose in film, like, you know, there's ways. There are institutions that fund films, like the BFI and the BBC Films and Film 4, and that have a budget for funding films every year. And then my films have been like, I've got money from within. So the Intent one, we fully financed from our friends. So like, we just went to our rich friends and we're making a film, and eventually, like, some of them said they'll give us this amount, and they gave us that amount, but eventually we got the money together, so we just hustled. And then Intent 2, we got the money from a record label, from Island Records. And then we're about to fund another film. We've got a super rich friend that wants it, do you know what I mean? And so it's about, I suppose, like, the more you do, the easier it is, and the more, like, I suppose the money attracts you, like, comes looking for you. Or like, people have seen, you've done that and that and that. I think I would love to know what you're doing next. So, but there isn't a fast and hard rule as to where you find the money. In TV, there's like, you just go and pitch every day, like, not every day, but you just go and pitch, and eventually someone likes your idea. And then
what about from your perspective, Angela?
So I deal with UK broadcasters, and you know what the tariff is for any particular idea you're pitching, and then if you're lucky, you get a commission, and you work within that budget. And sometimes, if there's extra things that are needed, you can get a bit more money. But because they have tariffs for all the slots, then you know more or less what you're going to be getting, even at the point of pitching it, what the money's going to be. So I'm not out there hustling for film money just yet. That's the plan.
That's the plan. So what about the relationship between you guys and the distributors? Does that come into it?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I find sometimes you pre-sale, so from the beginning you would have a distributor. Sometimes you would have to get that after you're done or whatever. But I think for me as a producer, it's just mainly about knowing what kind of film we're trying to sell. If that makes sense?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes people kind of feel like, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there, I'm going to do this. And sometimes you've made the film, but it's not what you thought you made, if that makes sense. And I think for me, anyway, you kind of have to know the kind of film you've made and where it's going to go, and how you want it to be seen in the public, which is more a marketing thing, because usually you just give it to your distributor and they will just market it how they feel to market it, or how they think it should be marketed. It's that thing of like, you make a hood movie and the distributors kind of feel, oh, we're going to do it this way because that's what usually works. And you might feel, actually, I want to do it in a different way. I think it's just about, standing your ground and fighting a bit.
So my first film was fully financed by a distributor, so that was an experience.
Which film was that?
It's a lot. So like, I remember the distributor, like, they were like, I was in the edit and I got a phone call and they were like, if you don't change the edit, we're gonna come down there and do it ourselves. That was a weird experience because, like, they had complete skin in the game because it was their film in a way. And that was the moment that I realised that it wasn't my film, it was their film, and they could do whatever they want with their film. And so so that was a fun experience. But in terms of distributors, I just feel like there's a problem with distribution in that distribution's predominantly white industry across the globe. And so a lot of black content, our biggest issue when you make black content, I'm not assuming everyone makes black content, but like when you make content with black people in important roles, you end up, people don't really get it, distributors don't. I remember we got, like, when we were doing the Intent 2, I made the poster. I was like, I want it to be like this. So I sent so much, like, I sent the longest email I've ever sent in my life, literally explaining every single minutia of what I wanted it to look like. And everyone's like, oh yeah, that poster's sick. And then the distributor will be like, yeah, we made it. We did such a good... I'm just looking at them like, you... And so like, and in terms of marketing as well, we're very much across the marketing. So like, we write our marketing plan and we're like, this is what we're doing. And if you don't want to work like that, because a lot of the people they don't understand, the work that I've made so far, they just don't understand that well. They don't understand that type of content. And so they struggle with marketing it, and then they start talking about how to reach audience. But then I'm like, no, I reach them every day on Instagram and Twitter. What are you talking about? And so there's all of that. So I feel like I struggle, my relationship with distribution is still very weird because every time I go into a distribution is a space where I've been to every single distribution company in this country in terms of film, right? And there's been 2 black receptionists and a black paralegal. And then there might be like, I might have met 1 acquisitions person that was black in distribution. And then everyone else is like non-black. And that's, in a way, that's problematic, because then you end up with people that are meant to be selling a film and marketing a film that just don't know, they don't have the foggiest about, you know, how to reach that demographic. If you're making black content, I feel like it's very specific to black content. Whereas if it's like, you know, your general like middle English, middle class white content, they're all across that. They'll kill it for you. But if you're making black content,
is that similar in script development in regards to the barriers of getting a story across?
I think so, definitely, because obviously you're pitching to broadcasters who 9 times out of, well, 10 out of 10 are not probably of the same ethnic background as you, or so. Yeah, I think it can be difficult, and it goes back to that thing that you were saying earlier about trying to tell the one black story, if you're telling a black story, and trying to make it as distinctive from all the others, and you've often got to sort of fight and prove why your one is different. So there are definitely sort of like hurdles that are in the way. I do think it is changing. I work with quite a few sort of non-white writers now whose stories are definitely on sort of at least the slate at the company that I work on, and they're all different from each other. But there are a couple that sort of touch the same territory and it's not an issue. Okay. So how far that's going to go, if it goes to a broadcaster, that's a different question.
But I also feel like with that black story, Blacklist, that a story is a story.
Yeah, of course.
And this is what I have a problem with. I have a problem with, like, you know, I talk about black British story because obviously that's our way of engaging with it. But like, I just feel like, you know, the problem we've got is that when a white writer comes in and pitches a story, it's a story because it's the norm. It's just like, you know, for a white writer to talk about anything that they want to because they're a writer. But the minute you become a black writer, your subject matter is limited to black issues. And then if it's a black issue that person on the other side of the desk has never come across before, or they think it doesn't fit into their prism of that understanding of that culture, it becomes problematic. Whereas if you're, I always wonder to myself, like, I wonder if white writers go in there and they're like, you know, are they expected to tell every white person's story? I'm sure they're not.
But then they're sitting opposite people who look like them.
Yeah.
And so who see the world with their gaze. So it's very different, I think, when you go in and you're not sitting opposite somebody.
Yeah, but I get that, but then I just feel like the challenge should be on, like, you know, commissioners, broadcasters, distributors, all these people to be like, you know, to just approach a story as a story and, like, you know, is it a good story? Yeah. But, like, actually there's an extra test for, like, you know, black content makers where it's like, oh, is it a good story? Yeah. Is it a black story as I understand black people? Yeah. That's another test that's applied to it.
But then also it might be a story that's a universal story, but then if it's got black characters in it, I mean, I've heard some retelling of tales about what is expected in a black story once there are black characters, even if it isn't a black story. So somebody I know who was working on something, the executive said, but this is so unusual because the children are all going to university and I've never come across, you know, something like that. And the person said, but that's all my friends. All my friends, all their kids have gone to university. They're all middle class, you know, and it was just like, oh, okay, you know, that sort of weird realisation.
Yeah, but it's based on that assumption of what black people are supposed to do.
Yeah,
that stereotype.
Exactly, yeah.
There's that other box, like there's almost like a toolbox. So, like, you know, are you a good writer? Yes. Yeah. Do you fit into this toolbox of what I think black people do? And like, but then they'll be the first person to tell you, oh yeah, I don't know how to reach black people, blah. So like, it's almost like all of a sudden they're playing, like, there's two games going on. On one level, it's like, oh yeah, I don't really understand black culture. On another level, oh yeah, I know everything about black culture because your story doesn't fit into what it means to be black. And so you define the boundaries of it, but at the same time you claim to know nothing about it. It's weird.
Does that apply in factual at all?
For us, the question that you asked earlier on about kind of what your goals as a producer, one of ours for our company is about selling stories that aren't just about black trauma.
Okay.
That's a big thing. So when I say like I want RET, I don't just mean like blockbuster, like I want our story of fantasy, because we stared out the window and we imagined the what ifs as well. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't just, so yes, I am using, like we call it Trojan horse storytelling. So yeah, I will get you to go, oh, what, he sold this and he did that, but I'm not showing you that part because you've got a version of that already. What you don't know was this was the guy who bought us our first cameras.
Okay.
And this was the guy who talked about having a code and was the first one to say, if you can't buy it twice, you can't afford it. This is where we heard it from, but we don't get to see him that way. So that for us is a big goal. It's like, I want to tell stories that doesn't act like trauma doesn't exist, but that isn't our only story that we get to tell.
Okay. So we're in a time where it's 50-50 by 2020, inclusion riders, Me Too, Time's Up, diversity standards, all these movements and campaigns have sprung up regarding safety, equality, and for representing groups of marginalised people, which I guess all of us sit in those brackets as well. What changes or adaptations have you had to make in your roles to ensure the projects you work on are aware of this?
I mean, I only make queer, black, and female-led work anyway, and on my sets I'm very kind of like, it has to be equal in whatever, like, be it colour, be it like sexuality or gender. I think for me it's just what I do. So I don't think it's something that I'm kind of like thinking, how do I do it? Because it's that same
it's
thing
already
of
embedded.
that same thing of diversity. When people talk about it, I'm just like, just give us the money and you'll be diverse. Do you know what I mean? There's no conversation to be had. That's what. Yeah.
All right, okay, guys on set.
I feel like diversity is like it's not a black problem. I've got a diverse group of friends. This is
but it's not just about diversity. It's about 50-50 and also Me Too.
In terms of the
team, and also because
no, my team's like my team's very mixed. Like you know, I don't really like in terms of team composition of team. If you're the best person for the job, you get the job. But at the same time, like you know, if you're like I say I have like some of the most black sets I've ever been on in my life. Like you know, and I've been on loads of sets, and so like you know, I've got more black people that work for me doing at different stages of production, like than any. Like I challenge anyone that works in producing and production to come on my set, and you know, I employ a lot of black people, and I employ a lot of like people from diverse backgrounds. I employ people from different sexuality. So off camera, I think it's an easier win for me. Like, but on camera, like this, like, I just let stories be what they are.
Angela, do you feel like somewhere like Douglas Road is more challenged to make sure they adhere to the rules, especially because Selenis has been vocal about representation and making sure that the industry does better?
Okay, so for me, I don't think about those rules because having mixed crews is something that I've always done, and it's just completely natural to have that. I think a bigger issue for black program makers is the expectation that and it does come up all the time, that we're not qualified to do the job that we're doing, or that we need training, or that person needs hand holding or whatever. So these are continual conversations. So sometimes it's not, it happens all the time. I mean, I could give you a million examples. So that's the issue, so that all of us who are in that space are trying to tackle. That, you know, no, we don't need training. Yes, we can do the job. Yes, that person that I've suggested, it's not because they're my friend. It's because I know that they're gonna, you know, I want to look good. Why would I hire somebody who isn't good to make me look bad? No, I want to look good. I'm going to hire somebody good.
It's interesting you said you didn't hire a friend, because the industry is quite, full of nepotism, and I know this person, and
Yes. So obviously, I'm going to be putting teams together that are going to gel, that I like, and all that sort of thing. But I think there is an undercurrent that, if someone suggested it, somebody actually said this to me. But this was, I worked on a massive team. There were, 300 or something people working on it, and there was hardly anybody of colour at all. And when I picked it up with, a couple of the big wigs there, one of them actually had the audacity to say to me, do you expect us to employ people just for the sake of it when they're not good enough? But they know me. So I was just like, but you know me. Do you think that I would employ somebody just for the sake of it when they're not good enough? They know I wouldn't. So I just thought that was extremely cheeky.
That's
and I
back
didn't
to Femi
appreciate
saying that
it.
they
I mean, I feel like the assumption is always that black talent is not experienced enough, does not have the right training, does not know how to do stuff, does not this, does not that. It's almost like there's all these things stacked up against you. There's always an assumption that your methodology is not good. Like, I mean, I was working with a distribution company on one of my films and we had to run away from them, literally run away. And their thing was like, you know, they were literally trying to peg us down at every stage. And like, I had to go back to the people that introduced us. Like, we can't work with these people. This is not working. This process, because like they asked me like, you know, so how do you think you're going to? How does your production work? Like, you know, tell us how. I'm like, what? I'm like, but we just made a film. We sold it to Netflix for the world. Like, you know, like, and you're not. Who are you? Like, do you know what I mean? So I just feel like there's always an assumption that your way of doing it, if you're a person of color, your way of working is not. You're not ready for that job. You're not ready for that level. And so it's just weird. It's weird.
So, what are you not watching? Or what's your favourite show at the moment? Dark Money.
Dark. It's a German TV show, but it's like really good. It's like, you know, it's really good. Like it begins with like this kid who goes missing in the forest, and then it's like season 2, but it's all about time travel actually. But it's just like, I started watching it, going, oh, the kid's gone missing. Who did it? Who done it? But it takes you on some crazy journey. And for me, like, I like that kind of stuff because it's that thing of like, which is I was talking about our kind of stories, because I was thinking like, well, there are forests in Nigeria that this could easily work as well. Like, there's that forest, I forget what it's called, but there's definitely a forest where everyone's scared of going in because there's juju in that forest. So imagine if that was in. So that's where I'm at right now, basically.
Dark.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's a hard question for me. Pass next.
Oh, right. Oh, wow. I'll come back to you and I'm going to ask you why.
Do you know, I can't even think of, but I can think of the thing I watched yesterday, which was The Great Hack.
Okay, yeah.
I watched that yesterday.
That's all I can think
Was
of
it
right
good?
now. It's really good. It starts off a bit like, oh, this is a bit dry, isn't it? Like, you know, liven up a little bit, but then it's really good. I think it's important viewing for every human being that has smart technology.
Oh, I watch such a massive variety of things. I like thrillers. I watch quite a lot of drama. Things where you learn something. I mean, you know, Who Do You Think You Are?
Okay.
Naomi Harris is on. And
Yes.
yeah, so all sorts of. I mean, it's just difficult to pinpoint one thing. I watch a very big spread of things, but also part of that. I mean, I like television. And it's good that I work in television because I like it, but also I like watching things because also you get to find out what's on trend, the things that you're developing. Is there something similar? Ditch that hasn't worked, you know. So there's all of that. So it's partly research and partly pleasure.
Same. I kind of struggle with it a little bit. Like, I watch a lot of documentary. I watched The Great Hack yesterday as well. The show that I think about the most when I'm not watching it is a show called Gomorrah.
Okay.
That is just like, that for me is amazing. Like, that will probably, I feel like I want to say it's gonna sit in my top 5 because it's character. Like, it's character. Like, I love a show where in season 1 you think it's just about this and you think you know everyone, and then by season 4 you're rooting for the one that you used to hate, and it's like, what does that tell you about you? So that's probably the show that I think about the most when I'm like, they've got a style, they've got a motif. I love their characters. They shot in London, but they shot in London in the way that they would shoot when they're shooting in Naples. So yeah, that's my show.
Back to you.
I think it's hard just because I watch everything all the time, but I would say Smell.
Who's that?
Have you heard of that? Smell.
I've heard of it.
Smell.
But what is it? Sell it to me. I've seen it a few times and I'm not sure.
It's just like a sort of half an hour comedy drama about this single mum in like New York. She's struggling. She wants to be an actress, aspirational, but she's a hot mess. And I just like it just because it's easy viewing. I think she's funny, and it's a real problem. Like, but she's done something different with it. She's also very problematic. The creator. That's it.
Okay. I just wanted to quickly throw in there. What's your proudest project? What's really like defined you as a producer, script developer?
The one I just did, Blue Story. That's like, yeah, I think it's one of those things where like you really figure out what kind of a producer you are. It's got this sort of Shakespearean vibe to it, I guess.
Okay.
But what I like about it is just in terms of what we're doing with it. It's very, it's within what I want to be as a producer anyway, and how I want to make films, and also just I was given a lot of free reign in terms of like, you know, creating the set, who I wanted on the set, how it was gonna run. So I think that really, I mean, some days are very hard, which is like, I guess it's just filmmaking in general, and like some days you're like through this. But in total, it was actually, now that I look back and I look at what we have, I'm like, okay, it was worth it, you know.
I haven't got that project yet that I think defines me.
Okay.
As yet. I'm proud of working on Bulletproof. I worked on the second series of that. I was just proud of the process. The team, the editorial team that was put together was, technically they were my peers, and I feel like that's probably the first time, you know, broadcasters probably trusted people as young as us to make sort of editorial decisions alongside sort of the writers and whatnot. And I think, you know, when I think about how we sort of developed the stories, it was a fun process. It was hard, it was tricky a lot of the time, but it's probably the one that sort of helped me cut my teeth the most.
I like to think my last project's always my favourite project. So maybe the intent too, but I don't want to be like, yeah, that's it, that's the one project, because there isn't one project, I don't think. I feel like, you know, maybe when I'm old and I've stopped doing this and I could look back and say, yeah, maybe that was it, that was the moment, but for now, I just having fun, experimenting with different narratives.
Okay.
So for me, aside from projects, one of the things for me is putting together great teams that really, really get on together, that really gel, and everybody's pulling, you know, so even when it's really hard work, then they are enjoying themselves. So that's a really important thing for me. And also teams that have met, you know, that are still friends years later, that's also very important. But in terms of recent things, and I wouldn't say I'm being defined as a producer by this particular project, but I was very proud of Soon Gone, A Windrush Chronicle.
Yeah.
Which was the first big thing that that Douglas Road made and that I developed before the rest of the team came on board, and that what ended up on the television was very similar to my original vision of it. And so yeah, it was an amazing moment when we had the first read through and all the writers were there and the cast were there and the production designer and costume designer and everything. I was like, wow, look at this. And then we made it, and it was a very, very short process as well. So yeah, not defined as a producer, but I am very proud of that.
Tyson, finally.
Mine is similar to what Femi was saying. So the thing that I'm working on at the moment is the one that I feel the most engaged with. And I probably feel proud of it because it came from an experience that at one time felt very shameful. So being in a very depressive state and kind of going, I'm sick of this feeling, I need to change this. And so we're doing a documentary called The Stretch, which is all about cognitive dissonance. So it's like, how do you manage the gap between where you are and where you want to be? And the people who've come on board to like be interviewed and talk about it, like that makes me feel like that's the producer I want to be going forwards. Is like, let me just kind of shine a light in some of the hidden areas and go, all right, let's talk about this. And then what I'm finding at just this stage is almost like we're all unified in our sense of feeling alone. Like we feel like it's just us, whatever that just us moment is. And then the more people you speak to, you're like, oh, raw, you're going through that in your way as well. Sick. So that is pointing me to where I want to go. But I'm still in the happy part. I know the crazy part is still going to come down where you're like, nothing works, it's terrible. But that's just kind of part of the journey.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, guys, thank you. The hard part's over. Now it's the fun part. This is the process. It's painless, don't worry, be over in seconds. So earlier on today we met with some writers who came up with an idea, and we took their idea to some commissioners who gave some feedback. So on the back of the feedback that the commissioners gave, I want you to maybe make some suggestions on how the writers could improve the narrative for you to be able to produce it. So this is it in a nutshell.
I'm going to close my eyes so I can see
and hear it and visualise. So it's called 26 Days, it's a comedy, it's a film. The theme of the film is legacy and reconnection. The lead character is a musician who has been making loads of money being a commercial pop star. However, his legacy is a bit tarnished, and his old ex-band member has come back from the dead to say to him, if you don't fix up in 26 days and create a tune that's going to improve your legacy, you're going to go out with a quiet, irrelevant squiggle, not a bang. Now, the commissioners have said the story itself is too convoluted.
The stakes are not high.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Like, I'm not
wait, can I give you feedback? Can I give you? So yes, they said the stakes are not high. There's not enough jeopardy, and it's a bit convoluted. They want it to be pared down and a bit more straightforward, and a few more hijinks along the way. What would you do to kind of go back to the writers and say, "This is how we can make this work"?
Well, who's the character? Like, I know who the character is, but in what the pitch is like. You've told me plot, you haven't told me character.
Okay.
And I feel like sometimes when you have plot, that means you have no character. If that makes sense.
Yes.
Why should we care about him?
That's what I mean. Like, there's no
why should we care? Because if he's screwed up his life, he's probably just a big loser.
Yeah.
And also, he's not screwed up his life. He's rich.
He's rich.
He's made loads of money. Who cares?
He's very
like a rich guy.
right now.
You want me to go to the cinema to watch a rich guy secure his life, long-lasting legacy? Who gives a damn? He's rich. He's enjoyed.
It's a moral dilemma. A very strong moral dilemma in there that's going to change his path.
Or maybe he needs to begin as somebody who, like, we have to, like, is he somebody who's actually very humble and all this stuff, and then maybe along the way, whatever it is, like, the industry just got him and he becomes this bad person because of something in his life that happened. I don't know, someone died.
So he needs to learn a lesson.
Basically.
He needs to go on a journey. He needs to learn a lesson. We need to be behind him. We need to sort of empathise with him. There needs to be high stakes. He needs to have a...
So his dog died. And then he went to the doctor.
That's the inciting incident.
His dog died. No, his dog got run over and didn't die.
He went to the vet.
And he went to the vet.
By the way, there's a child in here. I feel like I messed up the pitch.
I prefer the animal. I prefer the dog.
Okay,
child
so
died.
The dog got.
I took it there.
Oh no!
Wow.
I mean, if the child
If it
dies,
begins that way,
at least it's
Gary, you feel
at
free.
least
Okay, fair enough.
The child died and you're like, oh my god.
oh my gosh, I don't have a legacy.
What am I gonna
But
do?
you know,
Oh my
you know,
God.
like audiences love animals though more than children. Just FYI.
wow.
So, I don't,
John Wick, there we go.
That's
True
amazing.
story.
Yeah, that's
Killed
true.
the dog, I'm all in.
The dog died. I mean,
So, as the writer, what am I going back to do now I've spoken to you guys? What do I have to do?
you're gonna take those notes.
yeah. You know, go back and figure out what you're trying to do and what you're trying to say.
Okay.
What's the
So
point of
maybe
this?
he uses his money after his dog got hit,
Wow.
and the vet saves the dog to set up an animal sanctuary.
Oh my gosh.
And write
with
songs
the
about
money
them.
and
Write songs about it. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Maybe. So
I mean,
if
that's a
it-
comedy
if it's
already.
If it gets made, what do we get?
Yeah.
We just developed a story. Come on.
Thank you. Thank you guys for your input.
She swerved.
It actually reminded me of a few things. Like it was like there's obviously get him to the Greek. Like I could sell this story. Like even though it's, I could so sell it. Like you know, like it doesn't. You could even. I'll make my own pitch version. What I would do with this writer, I would rewrite a pitch, and go and sell it, and it will get money, and then they can write the dog version.
The dog
But I think
version.
the writer basically needs to go back and think about those things.
Yeah.
What is at stake? What is the consequence of said decision that you might make? How can you sort of bring across that
Yeah, I know.
journey?
Like, what is the
but
inciting
just-
incident?
but
Like a
just-
dog
yeah.
dying is
But just in terms of that, so who's created the story? Because we've got a legacy, but I'm the one who's putting the dogs that's been hit.
That note.
This is a problem already.
Show me the money.
Where is the
basically.
money?
That's what we're
Where
going
do we
for.
Well, on
start
that
from?
note, thank you guys for the process. That was the process.